Hello, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, 8 Features That Will Supercharge Your Business Continuity. My name is Kevin Collins from Unitrends, and I'm here with Nils Bergman, one of our solutions engineers, and he'll be taking us through the presentation and demo. And don't forget, one lucky attendee will be walking away with a $100 Amazon gift card. We'll call that person's name at the end of the webinar. But before we get started, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. This session will be recorded, and after the event, you'll receive an email with a link to the on-demand version of the webinar. I would also encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. You can do so by typing them into the Q&A box on the bottom right of the player. We'll answer your questions at the end of the session. At this point, I'll turn it over to Nils. Enjoy the presentation, and Nils, take it away.
Thanks, Kevin. Hey, everyone. My name is Nils Bergman. I'm one of the solutions engineers here on the pre-sales team. Today, we're going to be going through some of the new features that Unitrends has put out to help increase your environment's productivity in the backup world. So one of the big things and the big players that we've added to this realm is our Enterprise Plus edition. So while this adds in a lot of cool features, it also continues the same great experience that you've had on your Unitrends appliance or virtual environment. So this works for both our Recovery Series physical appliances and our virtual backup software. It adds some features such as testing, security features, compliance, and productivity, which I'll get into today. One of the big factors that we're pushing this is that, and we're pushing into this market, is that downtime has become more and more expensive for companies. As companies virtualize and they move more of their infrastructure from physical or paper documentation into the virtual realm, it's becoming more and more expensive as things go. For this, it's now not only crucial to back up your environment and be able to recover, but actually testing and making sure that we can alleviate and reduce downtime as much as possible. So to get into the 8 features, I'm going to start off with what's called our Distributed Enterprise Manager. Now, what this is essentially a single pane of glass, no matter how many locations, companies, sites, clients you might manage. So what this allows us to do is manage multiple entire environments, not just the backup and recovery jobs, but down to the system updates, the OS features, the system details in the back end. We can manage all of this through a single web interface. This requires no additional servers to be added in. It's simply just a feature that we can unlock in the API once Enterprise Plus is added in. The benefit of this is that if there are remote sites or if you're a company that works with clients that have small locations and these locations don't have local IT personnel, we can manage those backup services and backup products at a distance. The second feature is one that I find a lot of use in, having been a sysadmin in the past, and it's our role-based access control. So what we've added is a fully self-service feature. So essentially, admins can now add in not only multiple roles, but we can tie into Active Directory, we can add different scopes, and even different capabilities within those scopes. And this is something I did want to show in the interface. So I'm going to pull up my interface real quickly. We can dive in and take a look. So here we can see our new 10.1 interface rather. And essentially, to get into role-based access control, we look at our appliances. We go under Edit, and from here under the Users tab is where we can tie into Active Directory authentication. We can add in users still, add a standard name, user password. And then the roles that mention, monitor would be something if you had a summer intern or if you wanted someone to be able to view just the report section in the dashboard of the appliance. Manage is where we start to give out responsibilities, but we can set restriction scopes. So, for example, a recovery operator. If there was a DBA in the environment that needs to be able to recover their databases, but maybe you don't want them altering jobs or creating backups or scheduling recoveries for different systems, we can lock a scope down to their instance or even individual databases. And within there, we can set further options for things such as not allowing a SQL database restore as an in-place so that they don't accidentally overwrite, something like that. So we can build out these options and cater to whatever you might need in your environment. Now, hopping back in, the next feature that we're going to be discussing is our NAS Protection, our NDMP. And so this is one of the features that we've been working on and we've been adding in. So essentially, we allow for NDMP support as the transport protocol when customers are using things like EMC VNX systems, NetApp FAS devices. And NDMP really benefits that we're allowed to then take captures of those storage shares using not only fulls, differentials, but now we can utilize incrementals. So this allows for a much quicker backup period, and we can cut down and reduce that backup window drastically. And this is something that we inherently use the API built into the storage vendor that gives us the benefit to increase this productivity so dramatically. Now, the next capability is our Boomerang tool. And Boomerang is a parallel product, but with our Enterprise Plus edition, end users get unlimited access to that. So they get unlimited licenses to utilize it. Now, the brass tacks of what Boomerang does is we're allowed to replicate snapshot data from a VMware virtual environment into either AWS or Azure. So we can store and replicate those backups in AWS S3 or Azure Blob Storage. Now, just the local replication up to the cloud and being able to recover that isn't necessarily very different from what a lot of companies can do in the market. But what Boomerang does, that's kind of its special sauce, is the ability to convert those VMDK snapshots into AMI instances or Azure VMs. So we can do what's called a failover into either AWS, EC2, or Azure Compute and run systems within those environments. You can specify and pre-design the virtual machines that they're coming up as, establish elastic IPs or public IPs, and then once those systems are up, we can use Boomerang as a single one-time migration option, or should you need to do what's called copy back and bring those back locally, we can then reconvert those systems back to VMware virtual machines and inject them back into your local hosts. So this is a very useful tool for environments where customers are doing a one-time migration to one of these platforms, or if they have certain compliancies, things like AWS GovCloud, or if perhaps they just have a very established third-party hyperscale subscription already established, and their customers used to things like subscription fees, network costs, et cetera. And that wouldn't be something that would kind of break the bank or jump out of left field on them. Now, moving on, we get into our granular recovery. So the main focus of this is typically around Exchange, but we do offer SharePoint granular recovery as well. Now, with Exchange and SharePoint granular, essentially what we do is we take backups of either the storage groups for Exchange or the farms for SharePoint. And from there, we're able to break them open and go in and grab individual items from within. So for Exchange, this would be emails, attachments, calendar items, contacts. We can pull those back to OSTs, PSTs, export them out to mail files. And for SharePoint, it's a very similar structure. We're able to break in those databases and grab individual items from within the sites. In here, we can not only grab these items, but for Exchange, for example, we're able to search through not only the to and from and subject lines, the body, we can actually search for items within attachments as well. So our search capabilities allow for very, very detailed parsing through that data. Now, this brings me on to my favorite part of our Enterprise Plus feature, and this is why, as an engineer, I talk to my sales reps and I always tell them we should always start with Enterprise Plus, and if we need to pull down, we can. But Enterprise Plus, my favorite feature is what's called our data copy access job. And it has 3 different features that I'm going to go over. The main concept of it is the fact that we can do scheduled automated recovery testing. Now, if I were to ask most engineers, or even ask myself 2 years ago when I was still running as a sysadmin, if I test any of my backups, my response probably would be to snicker and say I test my backups every time I do a recovery, something that I feel most engineers and most admins can sympathize with. You just don't have the time in the day. And companies on the market that have released this type of technology the way that they do it is they spin up a system, they screenshot a login page, tear it down, and email out that screenshot. I've had too many Exchange servers come up and not start up a service correctly, or a DB not get mounted, or something just hang on a login screen because it's running Windows 2003 and I'm going to have a rough Monday. But all in all, we've added in a new feature that kind of alleviates that problem through and through. So the scheduled testing essentially allows us to not only bring a system up and online and test to verify RPO and RTO requirements, but we can also do granular level testing, which I'll get into in just a few. In conjunction with the granular testing, the RPO and RTO really assist with things like compliances. So companies that are looking and pushing to get their SOC compliance or HIPAA, or even if it's just an internal compliancy that you guys that they've set up regulations and RTO and RPO requirements, we can issue out these reports every time that the job completes. So in my test lab, I run the report every morning. Companies could run it twice a day. They could run it once a week. It's really something where when the auditor finally shows up, you can just simply export out these reports, or even prior to them getting there, you could email them all, just forward a copy of a zip file of all the reports bundled together. And it details out what RPO and RTO was obtained, so when the system was last backed up and how quickly it came online. Now, CDC, or copy data management, is something that used to be a parallel tool, and we've combined it into our data copy access realm. So this would be one of our second tasks that this job can do. So in addition to the automated backup testing, we can do instant test lab spin-ups. So sandbox environment, we can bring that up on the click of a button. We pre-design tasks that say, okay, these 5 systems or these 10 production systems, whatever it might be, are going to come up online. We design what's called a profile template, or a lab profile. So where are the systems coming up? What hosts, resource pool, storage pool, networks? And keep in mind, this works for VMware, Hyper-V, and any agent-based Windows backups. So we can pre-design where they're coming up, what networks. We can even reconfigure systems. We can bring them up with less resources. We can re-IP them. We can select a boot order. So we can pre-design this entire lab environment so that groups like Dev and QA can test things without having to worry about breaking them. We can push them up so that IT can push out patches on Microsoft Patch Tuesday without having to worry about if it's going to impact production. We can test and verify everything prior to actually pushing. Or just new software releases. We're able to verify that everything comes up and it will respond and play nice with one another. And in addition to that, what we've recently added is an itemized level. So we now can offer antivirus scans on our backup testing. So when we do the automated testing, it's something where we can check the integrity on a security level of a given backup. Now, we're not trying to displace an antivirus solution in your environment. What this typically has a good use for is something like an older database server that whenever the AV scan runs, it just really brings it to its knees. Or if there's a couple systems that are in an isolated DMZ that you don't really necessarily need, you don't want to put an AV on, or if the system is, the AV doesn't play nice with the OS, we can run our AV scan on the backup files. So it's a very useful tool to have on a couple systems where you might need specific backups, but it's just more efficient to run it on our side of things. Now, to really get into the details of what this job can do, I like to show at a high level kind of the different steps that it takes to create it. So in my environment, I have my systems added in, I have my job scheduled out and running routinely, and I would create what's called a data copy access job. Now, as I mentioned, there's those 3 capabilities. And so far, I've mentioned to you the backup testing and the lab spin-up. The third capability is similar to a lab, and it is a failover job. So essentially, we can pre-design and orchestrate an entire failover process similar to an SRM style. So in doing this, we select the systems that we'd be working with. So for example, I'll select these 3 systems. And depending on which of the 3 tasks we're going to be doing, we would build out a lab profile dependent. So for example, if I were to go in and design a failover, from here, I would specify my virtual host. I would specify my resource pool, my data store, recovery and test networks. If I was doing a failover, the recovery network would be the critical one that would be getting utilized for the failover task. If I'm doing the backup testing, this is the test network that my automated backup testing or my lab spin-up would come under. And then the appliance network is simply what network can the appliance communicate with these systems over. Now, for the backup testing, this window down here is where we would specify our RPO and RTO settings. Otherwise, for the other 2, we can leave that setting blank. Once we design our profile, we can then specify if we have a power on timeout. So essentially, waiting for systems to come online, we can change that timeout as needed. We can run custom scripts. So if we need something to run a script after it comes online, or this job to run a script on a given system once the job's complete, something like that. For the lab spin-up and the failover task, we most likely would run those as on-demand jobs. Ideally, you're not doing a failover once a week, something like that. But for the automated backup testing, we would want that to run on a schedule. So weekly, daily, even every hour. It really depends on the level. Our system will queue up based on resources available. So it's no matter if we limit down the resource pool that we utilize, our system will simply utilize what's available, and then it will queue up any systems that need to wait. Now, here's where things get cool. Inside of each system, we can go through redesigning and reconfiguring if we want the boot order to change, skip power on, reconfigure the compute and memory, so we could pull back on resources for a lab so that we're not bringing up an entire mimic copy of your production systems, things like that. Location would be specifying if we want the storage to move to a different data store after the system's online or something like that. And re-IPing would be useful if we're doing that failover job, for example, or in the lab environment, if we need to re-IP systems, create different adapters so that the systems come up recognizable by a different IP address. As for the automated testing, this is by far my favorite part of the solution because we can not only run custom scripts or do that security scan, but we can also tie in with applications like Exchange and check on transport protocols, mail delivery services. With SQL, we can run queries and get return codes, check on instances to make sure DBs mount correctly, check Windows services, even ping out to hosts or tie in with Active Directory and DNS, things like that. All verifying that the system has come up correctly in a timely manner, and more importantly, if you ever did need to recover these systems, it's just simply recover and then get going. It's not recover and fix the problems. Now, to verify all this, we have our reports. So this task has 2 reports tied with it. Our compliance report shows the RPO and RTOs, so what we hit for our compliances, what systems were tested, what RPOs and RTOs were obtained, and what our goals were for those systems. Now keep in mind, we can utilize our instant recovery capability when doing these tests because in a given failover scenario or a recovery scenario, you would be able to utilize that to get systems online quicker than normal. The second report is what's called our recovery assurance report. And this shows the tests that were run and the date and time stamps for each task that was run within that. So we're able to drill down and see what process was done under each system, if any specific tests were run, what the results were, and all of this can be exported out so that we have date and time stamps for each step of the way. All of this detail also gets emailed out every time the automated backup test is completed. So it's not something that you need to log into your UI every day to see. We definitely try to make this as easy as possible on the admin side as well. Now, with that, I kind of like to sum things up in what Enterprise Plus brings to the table. If you have an environment with multiple sites, multiple locations, remote sites without a constant IT personnel, the DEM tool is a great capability in that we can manage those sites from afar all the way down to system updates, system configuration, and making sure to not spread that capability between locations. So that's great for companies that manage different customer data and things like that as well. The granular recovery on the Exchange and SharePoint side is an awesome feature if you have an Exchange environment local or SharePoint environment. Obviously, by default, you're able to recover those items at the storage group level or the farm level, but the fact that we can break those open and grab individual items out and the search functionality really makes it a worthwhile capability. Boomerang is awesome for the features set of companies that are looking for very large system failover into a third-party hyperscale cloud environment, or a one-time migration to the third-party cloud. Or, for example, maybe there's just a couple systems that they need a DRAS opportunity, but they're not ready to go to the cloud with something like our Unitrends platform. Maybe there's just one or two systems that they just simply need just failover with the last day or so worth of backups. And lastly would be the DCA job, the data copy access capability. And that as a whole has our failover capability where we can orchestrate everything in a failover process so that we can stipulate which systems are going to what location, their boot order, configurations, networking. Our automated backup testing, which is something that no one else in the market currently has the capabilities that we do. The fact that we can not only bring the systems up and designate and report out what RPO and RTO is obtained, but we can also run granular level tests to make sure that the systems come up exactly as intended when needed. And then the last piece is that lab spin-up, which is something that is a really cool feature for both IT teams, dev, QA, production, whoever it might be. The fact that we can bring up those isolated environments for testing, for verification of backups, whatever it might be, it's a really cool function to have as well. So any of these, as Kevin had mentioned, any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. If there's further info or you want to see what process is needed to expand your local environment into Enterprise Plus, always feel free to reach out. If by chance you're already running Enterprise Plus and we're just watching this to see what features were available and for more information, always remember that our support team is more than available for educational purposes as well as putting out fires. So I always tell customers, if you're paying for support, use it as much as you need it, whether it's putting out a fire locally or if it's actually just trying to figure out what a certain button does or what a new feature does. Always feel free to reach out. And with that, as I mentioned, feel free to reach out and we can go into a more in-depth demo, one-on-one with your account manager, or we can further discuss what it would look like on a process to upgrade your local environment.
All right, Nils, thanks so much. As a reminder, you can still ask a question. Just type it into the bottom right-hand corner of the player, and we'll get your question shortly. So first question is, do we have the capability of taking Office 365 mailbox backups?
So we do. We use a parallel. We essentially resell a tool called Spanning. With that, the reason that we don't do it with our local appliance is that Azure has egress fees if data is removed from their environment. So what Spanning does is it allows us to take snapshots of the blob storage that your 365 environment is running in and then maintain it in a separate blob environment. So it still has the same SLA, the same redundancy, same HA availability. And with that, it essentially allows us to get granular level backup and recovery so that we can get past that sort of, I know Microsoft has some hard lines, 14 days for mail items that are deleted are kind of off into the ether. We can offer further retention and granular access to those backups as well. That's definitely something that we could discuss on a call with your account manager, in that it's typically a license head count, so it goes based off a head count rather than total data size, which is usually pretty helpful as well.
Okay, next question is, I mean, obviously you're showing this on the Unitrends appliance. What is the upgrade path to get to Enterprise Plus? What should a customer do to take advantage of the new features?
Sure. So if a customer is running a virtual deployment, essentially from there, they just would be instructed to update to the most recent version. And then from there, if they were to purchase Enterprise Plus, we just issue them a new license key. And support can help them if they need a hand on ingesting that into their virtual appliance. And from there, the new features are unlocked. The same concept actually goes for our physical appliances. So as long as that system is updated to the most recent iteration of our OS, we can issue a new license key that has the Enterprise Plus features unlocked, and from there it can be upgraded. The one caveat with our physical boxes is that some of the older systems, these features can be a bit process and memory intensive, so it is something that there are some, depending on how old the systems are, the last generation or the generation before that should be just fine. But if it's something older than 3, 4, 5 years, it may be looking at time to upgrade that system or just refresh that system. But nonetheless, before there's any hard lines in the sand, it would be worth a phone call to discuss it if there's any questions in the hardware matter.
Okay. Next question is, do you know if the granular restores using Kroll are going away?
So that is actually what we utilize for our granular restoration. So that is something that will remain. We are looking to integrate that into our UI, so it will be a single pane of glass. So that is on our roadmap for sure. But we do like our alliance with Kroll. Most of our customers enjoy the product and it works well. So that'll be around for some time.
Okay. The next question is, what's the largest storage size for the appliance?
So the largest appliance we have is our 946S, and that appliance has 180 terabytes of usable capacity, so post-RAID, 180 terabytes available, and then a suggested backup capacity of 118 terabytes. So what that suggested stipulates is that if an environment footprint or the systems that are in scope of our appliance are sort of a sum total of use space is at or below that 118 terabytes, customers should be seeing a minimum of that 30 to 45-day retention on their local appliance. From there, they can archive or replicate data as needed. And then the system itself has a full capacity of 180. So even though it's a soft threshold at 118, it doesn't mean a footprint of 125 or 130 would break the system or stop any jobs from completing. It just means that the further past that suggested line that you go, it correlates to retention. So you might see 18 or 20 days retention instead of 30 to 45, or the larger your footprint gets, et cetera. But our appliances can be horizontally stacked, so keep in mind that if there was an environment larger than that, or if there were sites that deemed larger appliances, we can stack our appliances. And it is something that slated for this year, we're going to be looking into a hyper-converged type system. So that would be something that would be adapted more for the extra large markets that can expand things out as needed. So for the time being, we definitely have customers that have 500 terabyte locations that we pair several of our appliances together to take a hold of. And then we have customers that use single appliances and things like that.
Okay. Next question is, do you know if there's any plans on the roadmap for an ISCSI/SMB based file recovery for Windows agents?
I think I might need a bit more information on that one. I can double check. I mean, for the SMB servers, that should be just fine with the current agent deployment, but I might not be understanding exactly. So if it's something, feel free to shoot an email to your account manager, and they can reach out to one of the SEs, and we can dive into it a bit further.
Okay. Next question is, would it be feasible to replace our SRM setup entirely with your solution?
I mean, from Unitrends, I would say yes. From a sysadmin in the past, I would also say I think it's I think at the very least it would warrant, we can do evaluations of our Enterprise Plus solution. So I would definitely say it's something that we could discuss and look into so that you could actually kind of put it to the test to make sure that it would meet your needs. I think that the capabilities are pretty awesome for a company of our size, and we're only growing, and our features are only expanding. So, for our first stab at this, for our automated testing and lab spin-up and things like that, I think we've already done a pretty awesome job, but we're only growing. So we're adding more built-in script tests, and we're adding more capabilities to the lab spin-ups, things like that. So I think it's only going up from here. But definitely, if there's any questions on if it would meet the needs, we can always try out an evaluation on either a full platform, or even if customers wanted to just try out our Enterprise Plus features, we can do an eval test on that as well.
All right. Next question is, do you have similar functions for Lotus Notes as you've shown for Exchange?
At the time, we do not currently. How Lotus Notes is backed up and managed is through its internal flat file feature. So it would be something that would be maintained, as I'm assuming you're probably currently doing, utilizing Lotus's internal feature, and then we back up those flat files with a failover recovery.
All right, we're just about out of time here. So as a reminder, this webinar was recorded, and you'll receive an email with a link to the on-demand version. I also want to call out the $100 Amazon gift card winner. Congratulations to Dale Nord of Tennessee. We'll be in touch, and we'll get that gift card out to you. Thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to having you on future webinars. Take care, everybody.